from Matthew 7, verses 7 to 12. And you can find that on page 685 in your Pew Bible, or page 1505 in your Pew Bible, the large print. Matthew 7, verses 7 to 12. Listen to the word of the Lord. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives. The one who seeks finds. And to one who knocks, the door will be opened. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask? So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets. Amen. Let us sing to his glory, the Gloria Patri. You may be seated. I want to start this morning's message by reading something. And I suspect that most of the men here will relate to this. But it's not just about the men. There's a concept, there's a point to this. And I'm just going to read it. It's a testimony, if you like, a testimony of what not to do. Years ago, when our children were young, we decided to get one of those jungle gym backyard swing and play sets. It had everything: swings, rings, monkey bars, a slide, a ladder, and a trapeze. They were going to love it. I knew it, and they knew it. Well, to make a very long story short, this wonderful play set came in a box, unassembled. You can't believe how unassembled it was. There were an unbelievable number of parts: bars, bracket, chain, bolts, lugs, lock nuts, hooks, and washers. On top of this great smorgasbord of parts was a small booklet of instructions which I, in typical macho style, tossed aside. Any of you guys do that? You don't have to raise your hand. I spread all the parts out in the backyard and started to work. I worked at it for hours, but I couldn't get it together. One attempt ended with not enough parts, another with parts left over. The gathering frustration was intensified by the incessant barrage of questions from the children. Daddy, are you about through? Daddy, why is it taking so long? Daddy, it didn't take Missy's mother this long to put her swing set together. About 4 hours into this project, with my religion vanishing like the light of a day at sunset, I noticed a bright yellow card lying on the bottom of the box in which the swing set had come. Printed on that card in large block letters were these words: "By the way, when all else fails, read the instructions." Now, I have to acknowledge that I am not that guy. I am one of those guys that when I get something, I take all the parts, I line them up with all the things, and I count them to make sure it says just like in that first page, and I follow the instructions step by step all the way through. Doesn't mean it's easy. I'm always got all the parts in the right places, and it all comes together. So what is my point in reading that to you today? I read that because When we read the text that we just looked at today, in and of itself, like taking it out of the box, and we read it, it said, ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be answered. We begin to immediately assume that we know what it's about and think this must be about prayer. And on the surface level, that kind of level, just taking it out of the box, you could argue for that. But there's something more that is going on. And that's what I want to address. One of the things that when you go to seminary, you learn this German phrase, Sitzenleben. And all that means is where it sits in life. Context. There is a literary context that this text fits into. And we have to be mindful of that. This is not just about prayer, it's about prayer with a certain emphasis and a certain direction and a certain result. If you remember last week, we looked at the passage from 1 to 12, 1 to 6, on do not judge. Jesus said, don't judge because that's harsh and severe, but instead learn the discipline of taking the plank out of your eye so you can take the speck out of someone else's eye. And we saw how the Christian life is a life that we live together, and our calling is to help each other do this Christian life together. The Christian life was never to be a one person trying to live for Jesus. We do it together. And we saw how in the Christian scriptures, in the Bible, there's a phrase that Paul uses at least 52 times. And I've introduced it to you in one of the newsletters called one anothering. Love one another, encourage one another, bear one another's burdens, spur one another on, build one another up. And so there's a one anothering discipleship that we need to do together. And when we can do this together, we will see less judgmentalism and more encouragement. Now, one of the one another's was admonish one another, which means to correct one another in the path of faithfulness. And that's what Jesus was teaching. And if we take the title in the text, remember there's no titles, there's no sections, there's no verses, there's no chapters. So if we remind ourselves that the last verse in one anothering, discipling each other, encouraging each other, taking the planks and dust out of each other's eyes, and then it says, do not give dogs what is sacred, do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. Remember, he'd been setting the entire Sermon on the Mount in contrast to the empty righteousness of the Pharisees. And so, don't share truth with someone that's not prepared to do that. And then, ask and it will be given. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open. They're connected. The entire Sermon on the Mount is one message to disciples. So we don't want to pick it apart and say, this text, I like this text. You ever know people like that? They take the Bible and say, oh, I like this text. They ignore everything else. This has a unifying message. And so, this is connected. So there is a connection between what we just read, is that we are called to disciple one another, one anothering. So one of the, if you will find all the references in your sermon notes, that we are called to love one another. A new commandment, Jesus said, I give you, love one another. Also, we are to be in harmony with one another, be at peace with one another. And so, all of these things is part of the Christian life that we do together. There's no I in church, remember? There's no I. There's just a you. You, plural, us. We are to honor one another. We are to hold each other up. And what we have in this text are some simple instructions, like that yellow card in the box of the swing set, that we can grab a hold of. What Jesus is doing here is giving us some patterns of thought, perspectives, instructions of how we can do this together. The first thing that one another in discipleship, it needs to be intentional. Notice it says ask, seek, knock. Those are intentional things we have to do with each other. We have to ask, hey, Dave, how are you doing spiritually? How's your walk with Jesus? Well, not right now. I can't talk right now. Well, I continue to seek to encourage you. And I'll continue to knock so that we don't leave anyone behind, but we will work together. That's what Jesus is talking about. It has to be intentional. How many times have we heard in the life of a church people who feel like they've fallen through the cracks? We have to be intentional of our encouragement of one another. Ask, seek, knock. Ask someone, how are you doing spiritually? Can I pray with you? Things like that. The other thing is that one another in discipleship that Jesus has in this text requires time. Ask and it will be given. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will. There's a suggestion that there's a passage of time. It's going to happen. So when we invest in each other, when we are intentional of keeping tabs on each other, we need to give time. We have to invest time. It's not an occasional thing. It has to be intentional. A lot of these things we're going to be developing here at Faith Reformed. We're going to be developing elders districts. We're going to be developing a buddy system. We're going to be developing all kinds of things by which we can walk with each other in this Christian walk, and it has to be an investment of time. God gave his time for us, right? Jesus gave those years for us on the cross. He spent time on the cross. So we have to do the same with each other. The third thing, one another discipleship requires consistency. It doesn't say ask once. It doesn't say seek once. It doesn't say knock on the door once. It says keep knocking, keep doing it, keep doing it. I remember a lady, I think I might have mentioned it before, she said to me one time, I don't believe in prayer. I prayed once, nothing happened, so it doesn't work. Well, that's not, remember what Jesus said in Luke 18, verse 1? Jesus told this parable to his disciples to keep on praying and to not give up. That was the parable of the widow going before the evil king every day. So in our relationship with each other, there has to be a consistency. Touching base, connecting. How are you doing? I know, Dave, I called you last week. I'm calling you again. How are you doing this week? Can we go for coffee? We can do that with each other to shore each other up. But don't just leave it there. Take it to a place where, how are you doing with Jesus? How's your struggle? Are you overcoming? Are you growing in grace? Are you growing in the understanding of Jesus? That's the goal of the Christian walk. That's the goal of church. The church isn't about being gathered on Sunday. That's just a part of it, to worship and to exalt the one who's called us out of darkness. But in surrendering ourselves to him, in response afterwards, we go and be the people of God together so that we can go out there and bring more people into the kingdom. But if we're not prepared to do that, we've got to ask the question, why? What are you afraid of? What's your fears? What's your anxiety? What are you struggling with? This is where one anothering can happen. We're also looking at life groups focused on one anothering so that we can do the Christian life together. So here's Jesus laying it out. He says, when you guys engage in this lifestyle of dealing with the planks in your eyes and the dust in your eye and moving forward without judgmentalism, without cruelty and harshness, ask, be intentional, seek, invest time, knock, be consistent. And all of these things will begin to happen. And then he shifts gears because we're doing it with each other. We're asking those questions. And then he shifts gears in verse 9 and said, which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? And this goes to the heart. So we want to do this with each other, but we are first driven to prayer that we might seek the Father's wisdom of how we might be beneficial to our brothers and sisters, because we want to ask questions in such a way that they are feeling they're being nourished by the bread that he will give us and not condemned by the stones or the snake that is harmful. And that's what Jesus is saying. So you guys be careful Because even in the questions we ask, I can say, Dave, I haven't seen you in 3 weeks. That's a stone. That's a snake. Instead, we need to ask, Dave, I haven't seen you. How are you doing? What's going on? Anything that we can work through, talk about. That's where we ask the question, because I've taken the speck out of my eye, the plank out of my eye, so we can connect together. But it begins with coming to the Father and asking those questions. Father, how can I be a blessing to my brother Dave? Take the plank out of my eye so I'm not critical. Take the speck out of his eye that he's not ashamed, so that we can talk about Jesus as brothers and move forward to the glory of his name. You see how this is working? This is him providing the tools and the handles, the instructions of how we can grow together. So this is where the prayer component comes in. But a lot of people will take this, but, well, Lord, I want this. I want this, so I'm going to keep asking, and I'm going to keep asking every day, every hour, every day, every hour, and I'm going to keep seeking, and I'm going to keep banging on that door until you give me what I want. That's not what he's talking about. That's when we take, how that guy tried to build that swing set without the instructions? And the first time he did it, he didn't have enough parts. The next time he did it, he had too many parts left over. When we do this stuff without the proper context, we're doing all kinds of things wrong. And that includes our prayer life. And that's when he gives, the Father's going to give us good gifts. So when we seek to be supportive of one another, and we go to the Father for wisdom and discernment of how we can do this, and how we can ask, and how we can seek, and how we can knock on the door together, and we know that God's going to help us, and he's going to give us the good stuff, that's when he says, so in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. For this sums up the law. And what is that verse, when you take it out of the moorings of this sermon, what do we call that verse? The golden rule of life. And you know what? I find that so annoying. Because there are people who say, well, I say, are you a believer? I don't believe in Jesus, but I tried to live by the golden rule. Oh, I said, what's that? Do unto others as I would want them to do unto me. I said, well, you can't do it without Jesus. That's the whole point. This is not, when we yank it out of the context, we violated the scriptures. It sits here for a reason. So, the bottom line is, God has good things for us that we can share with one another. And if I want someone to treat me nice, I need to treat them nice. If I want them to ask about me in a way that's gracious and merciful, I need to be at least willing to hear the question. This has to be at the heart of what we're about, because God is with us and for us and in us so that we can experience this stuff together. And then he says, for this sums up the law and the prophets. If you were to fast forward to chapter 22, somebody asked Jesus, what is the greatest commandment? And he said, to love the Lord with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your strength. But the second commandment is like it. Love your neighbors, love each other as you love yourself. And so this whole concept of asking, seeking, and knocking must flow out of our relationship with him, with the love relationship, and to each other, that we want to encourage one another to be built up in the faith of Jesus Christ. That's why read Paul's prayers sometimes. He has prayers that he had for the church in every one of his letters. I think it's Ephesians that says, I pray that your knowledge of Jesus would increase, that you would grow in how deep, wide, and far the love of Christ reaches. But he prays that for the church. Not just for Bernie, not just for Dave, but for all of us, that we would experience this together and we would encourage each other together. And so this is why it's so important that we thread all the components that we have in the Sermon on the Mount together. And we're going to discover some very significant things next week. The next passage, the narrow gate, the wide gate, fascinating stuff when you read it in the context of the Sermon on the Mount. So here we are today. We are here to encourage one another. And sometimes we just have to ask the question, how are you doing? How's life going for you? How's your relationship with Jesus? Keep seeking those opportunities to walk alongside each other and knock and say, hey, how's it going? What can I do for you? How can I pray for you? That's what we should be doing for each other. And I hope someone does that for me. That should be the conversation in our head. But so many people, after a time, they drift away. Why? Because nobody's asked them that question. Nobody's connected. Nobody stepped into that place and said, hey, what can I do for you? And so we don't want that to happen. We want to grow up into what Paul says in Ephesians, into the fullness of the measure of Christ, where he's at the center of everything we do. So I encourage you, read the instructions like the yellow tag. When in doubt, follow the instructions. Let us ask, let us seek, let us knock with each other together, and we will experience the grace and mercy of God. Amen. Amen.